Today, we've got the sensitive story of a man who just wants to show his crack to the world, and the man who kills him for it. That's right, it's Buttcrack, the trauma classic. This movie starts with a man. How does it start? I think it starts with a phone call, and Buttcrack getting a phone call. And then our hero, Brian, buying a ring from his friend Ken for his girlfriend Annie, who he wants to marry. And then Annie comes over, and Buttcrack, also known as Wade, goes to make himself scarce. But he really doesn't make himself scarce. He really appears just about as much as any man could appear and show his Buttcrack to Annie and Brian. Because that's all Wade wants to do, share his beautiful Buttcrack with the world. But Annie and Brian don't appreciate that Buttcrack. Annie's feeling sick and bails on Brian before Brian can ask to marry her. So then, Brian comes up with a plan, talking to Ken on the phone. Ken's going to take Wade out to a movie, so Annie and Brian can be alone. Wade agrees, and Brian gets to cooking. He's using pots, yet what him and Annie look like they're eating is chicken wings. You don't typically cook chicken wings in a pot, but they're potted chicken wings. Potted chicken wings. That's a new meal for people. And Ken takes Wade out and starts to mention to Wade that he should wear a belt because Ken keeps seeing his Buttcrack. Wade thinks Ken's coming on to him. Because if a man kept telling me he was looking at my Buttcrack, I'd probably think he was coming on to me too. Because Ken is secretly coming on to Wade. Because Ken is gay in this movie. So Wade decides to walk home. But Brian asks Annie to marry him, and Annie says yes after they eat and they're dancing. But just then, Wade appears in the door and starts dancing too, showing Annie his Buttcrack, and Annie gets sick all over the place, including on Wade, who then goes to take a bath. This is when the plot thickens, because he's got the radio in there. And Brian loses his temper, goes to yell at Wade, and grabs the radio to shut it off. And the radio falls in a tub, electrocuting Wade, killing him. And Ken arrives just in time to call Wade's parents and break the news. Brian explains to the police what happened. Well, his side of the story, that the radio accidentally fell in the tub. And at the funeral, we see Preacher Man Bob, a televangelist, delivering the sermon, getting lots of amens. And then Wade's sister appears to Brian, cursing Brian that if anyone says Buttcrack 12 times in a single breath, Wade will come back for his revenge. So Annie, Ken, and Brian go back to Brian's house. And Preacher Man Bob shows up, making sure they're okay after their loss of their friend Wade. Him and Ken go in to have a secret meeting. Well, it's not really a secret meeting. It's a meeting where Preacher Man Bob can just tell Ken all about the powers of Jesus. How Jesus walked on water. How Jesus turned water into wine. Jesus did a lot of things with water. How Jesus turned ducks into fish. How Jesus turned fish into ducks. How Jesus was a miracle maker. How Jesus traveled back in time. How Jesus rode a dinosaur. How Jesus captured Noah's Ark in a single glass. I'm making stuff up about Jesus. So, Brian and Annie are talking, and Annie just so happens to say Buttcrack 12 times in a single breath. Well, I'm assuming it was 12 times because that's what we need for the plot of the story. I wasn't actually counting. And Wade comes back. And he's walking down the road, singing and dancing on his way back to Brian's house. When a man comes along in a sports car, probably the only decent car in this whole movie, yelling at him to pull his pants up. But then he looks at Wade's butt crack and his face starts melting. You'll hear more from this man later. Now, Wade comes along just in time after Preacher Man Bob marries Brian and Annie. And they're all dancing. So Wade starts dancing. And they say, what should we do about Wade? He's clearly back alive. Preacher Man Bob says, put him down. So they beat Wade till he's unconscious. And then bury him again. But Wade's sister is waiting for him at the grave as he rises back up. And Wade's sister explains that he has to kill Brian. So Wade goes on his way to kill Brian. But Brian, Ken, and Annie arrive back at Brian's house. And so does the guy whose face was melting, who is now a zombie, who attacks Annie. And then attacks Brian, but Ken tries to pull him off. But then he attacks Ken. Just then, Buttcrack arrives, / Wade, trying to help Brian. Because he has to kill Brian. He can't let a zombie kill Brian. And Annie looks at his Buttcrack and becomes a zombie. Then Ken looks at his Buttcrack and becomes a zombie. Then Brian, trying to run for his life, but getting attacked by 3 zombies at once. But Preacher Man Bob shows back up with his shotgun, killing the zombies. But Brian appears to be dead, and Wade beats on him till he comes back to life, just to strangle him and kill him, and gets shot by Preacher Man Bob. And then we see Wade's sister by his grave as Wade wanders back, missing an arm, and falls back in his grave to rest. And as Wade's sister gets in her junk car, her car is junkier than my car. And my car is 20 years old. Preacher Man Bob shows up, exacting revenge, and shoots her 6 times in the face. As any good preacher will do to any good voodoo priestess. And then we go 1 year later, where an old man is taking photograph of Wade's grave for his book about killers of the city of wherever they're at in Virginia. I couldn't quite make out the town name. And they tell the story of Buttcrack. And his son just so happens to say Buttcrack 12 times in a single breath. And we see Wade's hand rise up from the grave again as they're walking away. His only hand. Now, this is a good movie. You get to see a Buttcrack a lot. So for those of you Buttcrack fans, this is your movie. So for those of you who want to see a fat guy's Buttcrack, this is your movie. Because you get to see a fat guy's Buttcrack a lot. Ultimately, this movie's funny. It doesn't have a lot of good scares in it, but it's funny. Preacher Man Bob's great in it. Got some good laughs. Annie's kind of cute. I think Wade's sister's kind of cute, though she looks kind of old. Preacher Man Bob's great in it. You get to see a fat guy's Buttcrack a lot. How many movies can you get to, and have you seen where you get to say, I get to see a fat guy's Buttcrack throughout most of the movie? I mean, there's like only a dozen. So I give it 12 out of 10 stars. Check out the Troma classic Buttcrack. Now, Wade plays Atari a lot in this movie, and it's from 1998, and PlayStation was around. But I imagine they're like, we're going to show off this guy's Buttcrack a lot, and he's a big fat guy. And PlayStation was like, we want nothing to do with that. They're like, we'll just have them play Atari. This movie's on Tubi. It's called Buttcrack. It's by Troma. It's on Tubi. I could not find it anywhere else, but it might be on Pluto. I did not look, because Pluto's commercials are way worse than Tubi's. I did not look anywhere else. I know it's not on Amazon because I looked there first. So check out Buttcrack. Next week, I'm thinking the movie's called Sugar Hill. It's about a Cajun woman who brings zombies back after her nightclub owner fiance is killed, who brings zombies for revenge after her nightclub fiance is killed. I'm thinking it's called Sugar Hill. I should have probably checked before I made the video. But that's the movie. It's a blaxploitation movie. It's a great film. That's next week's movie. So check that out before next week, or you can just watch it with me next week. Once again, this week's movie was Buttcrack. It's on Tubi. One of only maybe a dozen movies where you could see a fat guy's butt crack throughout the whole movie. Once again, 12 out of 10. Check out Buttcrack. So see you next week.